Morning guys, we're going to start a new topic today based on fractions, decimals and percentages. So first of all, in this first lesson we're going to be learning how to convert a decimal to a percentage or a fraction. Okay, so let's begin by looking at these two quantities. So if I have the number 1, let's say this number 1 represents one whole of something. So it might be a chocolate bar, something like that. If I have one whole chocolate bar, are we happy that we have 100% of that chocolate bar? Okay, so the number 1 represents 100%. 1 stands for one whole, 100% represents one whole. So what happens if I halve both quantities? Okay, so if I halve 1, I have 0.5 or a half, and if I halve 100%, I have 50%. So 0.5 is 50%. Let's say if I halve these quantities again, so if I divide both sides of my diagram by 2, I will have 0.25 and 25%. What happens if I divide both sides by 5? So if I take 0.25 and divide it by 5, I'll get 0.05, and 25% divided by 5 gives me 5%. I want you to pause the video and ask yourself, what is the link between the quantities on the left and the quantities on the right? Okay, well, what links these two pairs of quantities? Well, I have 1 times by 100 gives me 100%, 0.5 times by 100 gives me 50%, 0.25 multiplied by 100 gives me 25%, 0.05 multiplied by 100 gives me 5%. Okay. So we can generalize here. We can say that to convert from any decimal and make it a percentage, all we need to do, we multiply it by 100. That doesn't just work in that direction, it actually works the other way as well. So to get from a percentage to a decimal, make a prediction. How do I get from a percentage to a decimal? Well, going the other way, I'm dividing by 100, right? So I could also say that to convert from a percentage to a decimal, I divide by 100. Okay, so let's just start off by practicing our basics, and then later on in the lesson we're going to make it much more challenging. So first of all, convert from 0.37 to a percentage. Well, we know from what we just talked about that to get from a decimal to a percentage and multiply that number on your screen by 100. So 0.37 times by 100, I just shift its place value 2 units along, so that gives me 37. So I could therefore say that 0.37 is the same as 37%. Okay, pause the video and try your one. Okay, 0.38 as a percentage, well, to get to a percentage and multiply it by 100 to get 38, so we could say that 0.38 represents 38%. Okay, so find your worksheet on Google Classroom and work your way through task 1 please, and all your answers are on the sheet, and then come back to this video once you're ready. Okay, so next part of this lesson, I want you to look at this word on your screen, so cent. I want you to ask yourself, where in real life have you heard this word cent before? Okay, so I can think of lots of examples in our English language where we use that word cent. One example could be something like a century. So century starts with cent, and 1 century represents 100 years. Can you think of any more examples? Well, another one you could say, let's say you've been to America where they use the currency dollars, or let's say you've been somewhere in Europe, for example, where they use euros. 100 cents represents $1 or €1. Okay, and maybe the most obvious one is when we're thinking about percentages. So per cent means per 100. And actually, what links all these quantities? Well, cent means 100, right? So a century is 100 years, a dollar is 100 cents. And an easy way to remember this is if you look at this percentage sign, do we see that it kind of looks like the number 100? So that line, you could call it the 1, and then these two little circles, you could kind of call them the zeros, can't you? So that's an easy way to remember. So percent means per 100. I'm going to show you why I've chosen to explore that language in a second. We're going to try 2 examples. We're going to start off with a decimal, and we're going to do 2 things to it. We're going to convert it to a percentage, and then we're going to convert it to a fraction. We know from earlier on how to convert a decimal to a percentage. It's quite an easy calculation. I take my decimal 0.6, multiply it by 100 to get 60, so I've got 60%. Okay, so I've done part A already. Now let's think about how to write it as a fraction. Well, we just said that percent means per 100. So I could say that 60% means 60 per 100. If I write this as a fraction, 60 per 100, it just means 60 out of 100. So it's 60 100ths. Okay, so this is a valid answer, but to get my full marks, more often than not, I will be expected to simplify the fraction as well. So simplifying 60 hundredths, let's divide the numerator and denominator by 10 to get 6/10, and I can actually simplify it some more because they're both even numbers, so I know I can divide both of these quantities by 2. So 3/5 is my final answer. So 0.6 as a fraction is 3/5. So to recap, I write it as a percentage, make my denominator 100, and then simplify. Please could you pause the video and see if you can work out 0.65 as a percentage and a fraction. Okay, so first of all, writing as a percentage, I think percentage is definitely the easier one to do. All I need to do, take 0.65 and multiply it by 100, like what we said earlier. Okay, so I could say 0.65 is 65%. Now, to write it as a fraction, I'm going to remember what percentage means. I have the percentage, so 65% means 65 per 100, because cent means 100, doesn't it? So if I have 65 per 100, I have 65 out of 100. This is how I write this quantity as a fraction. Now, let's simplify. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5. So the numerator and denominator, let's divide by 5. So that's going to give me 13/20ths when I simplify that fraction. And this is my final answer. Okay, so at this stage, please can you find task 2 on your worksheet that I've attached for you on Google Classroom and work your way through those problems. Thank you.